come from a mixed rural urban riding, and I know that moving forward beyond climate change, the two big issues that the world is facing is food and water. And as we were discussing earlier, Canada has the ability to lead the world and to offer the solutions. But to do that, we need the people and the diversity of ideas to come up with the very best of technologies and practices, and then to be able to share it and communicate it in a way that can help with the adoption of these ideas elsewhere. Lloyd has been a very strong champion for the various ways in which this place is innovative and leading the way. I just met with your EDI team, your folks at GenEQ are pretty amazing, and they're helping with that talent pipeline. And now we're here talking about the connection between technology and precision agriculture and the role that the federal government can play in creating the conditions for you to keep rocking it. So talk to me a little bit about your experience with the broadband application that you were successful in. We will be rolling out a universal broadband fund in the coming months. This is part of the $1 billion investment that was announced in budget 2019. And what we want to make sure we do with this fund is learn from the last call for proposals, figure out where the bottlenecks are, and ultimately ensure that we are accelerating builds and removing barriers from those who are keen to go. So this is your space. I'd love to hear from you what's working and what do we need to tighten up as we roll out the next tranche of funding.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I think we thought we would do is we have just a couple of comments from each of us, and then David will be our expert on broadband and provide some comments. But also in the rural economic development side of things, we have a few comments as well. And I think it's perhaps worth just reflecting on the fact that we're in a greenhouse to start with, because the greenhouse, and interestingly, I'm taking a group of students next week down to Essex County, where you'll be aware of the concentration of greenhouses that exist there. It's an example of this connection between agriculture, technology, the importance of broadband to the greenhouse sector as an example, and to agriculture more generally. So I think those are relevant to think back in terms of how does that connect into rural economic development. And Orion will talk a little bit more about the expertise that exists here at the university, but just to reflect on the program that Ryan and I are from within OHC is the only accredited planning program in North America that focuses on rural communities, has that specific focus. So that provides some of the context and background from which we come.
And that's the Rural Institute.
And that's well, we're connected to the Rural Institute as well, but the accredited Rural Planning Development Program, which is a master's program. And we do very practical research, which reaches out to community, attempts to provide solutions ranging from how do we deal with immigration in rural communities to how do we deal with economic development in rural communities, and the planning side of things too, which is really quite key. So with that, I'm just going to turn it over to Ryan. And
sure, well, maybe just to
talk about what our expertise is.
Yeah, a little bit. It's kind of nice to be at the University of Guelph, where there's probably one of the largest public investments in rural economic development in Canada, in terms of the faculty across the university, in terms of the partnerships with both provincial and federal governments. There's lots of examples of those partnerships. One of them is the position that I hold, which actually is a research chair that's been funded by Liberal Credit Union and 2 farm families, which was around advancing rural economic development and trying to put forward and work with communities and businesses on a variety of different ideas. But across the university, we've got all of these expertise around broadband, around economic development, land use planning, conflicts that sometimes emerge between rural and urban communities, your riding being a good example of that. And so we've got these really interesting innovations that are taking place. The one that's exciting for us is we've got 10 of our master's students heading down into Toronto on Sunday. They'll actually be meeting with 300 of the elected mayors from across the province of Ontario, and they're looking at the intersection between economic development and immigration, particularly around workforce development and housing issues, but a whole series of things happening there. But it's an opportunity for students, and as Malcolm was saying earlier, around talent and developing that talent and transferring that knowledge to find out what communities need and what can we do and how do we connect the dots on all of that front. There's a wealth of expertise here that's really exciting on the rural economic development front. But maybe let David talk about some of that in broadband and that innovation.
Yeah, the self-promotion begins. But the R2B2 project, Regional Rural Broadband Project, is the largest, most prolific research group on broadband in Canada. was started by Helen Hambley. I wish she was here to meet you. She's unfortunately out of the country.
I was going to ask you if Helen's still involved.
She's who I'm accountable to.
Super.
But
That's
yeah.
where I met you first.
Yeah, exactly. And so Helen's done a lot of great work, kind of working on those public and private side, and then the research side partnerships on this issue. We're really, really big on promoting the data analysis side of this problem. In terms of research and data analysis, broadband issues in Canada are still somewhat in their infancy almost. There aren't too many publications on a Canadian context about the economic impact of broadband, how to promote broadband adoption and expansion. And then when you get down to the rural issues and the different nuances throughout Canada, it becomes even more complicated. But our real focus with R2B2 has been on southwestern Ontario. So we're the research arm for SWIFT, which is the Southwestern Integrated Fiber Technology Incorporated.
Yes,
They
we
were
are very familiar with
Yes,
Swift.
I figured you'd be.
We put some A's in that basket.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So SWIFT has funding from the federal government, provincial, and then private side as well, and some municipal funding to leverage as well. And just this year, SWIFT has now announced projects in southwestern Ontario, in Wellington, Norfolk, and Lambton counties to begin some of that expansion.
What stage of their expansion are they at?
Shovels haven't gone into the ground yet, basically waiting for temperatures like this to start before shovels can go into the ground. But yeah, just mid-January, end of January, those projects were announced. Fairly substantial funding commitment, as I'm sure you know.
What's the percentage of the total?
Percentage of the total area of SWIFT that's being...
No, percentage of funding that you've identified.
Oh, I would have to go back to SWIFT's numbers. I know they have that information on their website.
We'll be meeting with some of them later on today as well.
Oh, okay, perfect. That's great.
Today is the day of speed.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So anyways, going back to R2B2, basically SWIFT relies on us for some of that data analysis, kind of getting at that economic development, trying to prioritize, who needs connectivity more urgently than others. And yeah, so we conduct some of the baseline studies. So for example, with these 3 counties, we'll be conducting baseline studies on them to determine what connectivity looked like before these builds happened, and then what the impact was after that. And of course, always the goal is stretching public and private funds as far as they can go to get the most households connected in Canada.
The key part of your research, if I may, is that you're not one of the big telcos, and you're not affiliated with one of the big telcos.
Yeah.
So we're looking for unbiased information, and the work that you've done. I had to sign a confidentiality agreement before I went into the meeting to find out what it was in terms of connectivity that you're looking at. But very advanced, and it was part of the industry committee study that we did on broadband last year. To the degree that we could share the information, but at some point, maybe that's something that we can look at as well.
Yeah, of course, and that is a big element of this as well. As you can have economic analysis and data analysis, but the data stewardship is almost just as important on this issue. There's a lot of proprietary information. The very nature of the analysis we do a lot of survey analysis where we're asking people, where they live, what their income is, and then we ask them to run speed tests so we can get a sense of that quality of service. And as you can imagine, the data stewardship, and we take that very seriously, and that's a big component of the R2B2 program. And then the knowledge transfer is something that we really try to emphasize as well, is getting more people like yourself, in the room so we can annoy you with these statements. But
You're not annoying me. This is really helpful. Keep going.
But anyways, yeah. So we try to perform a lot of that outreach to try to let Canadians and public officials know what that issue looks like right now and where Canada stands. I think especially the recent announcements are definitely moving in the right direction. I think the funding is strong, and it sends a strong signal, I think, to researchers like myself, and I think to rural Canadians. For example, one thing that we look at is the OECD publishes numbers about fiber connectivity and fiber to the premises connectivity, and Canada is about parallel with the United States on that front right now, but below the average for the OECD. So it's another interesting thing to think about. Obviously, each one of these countries is different. The challenges that are experienced in Denmark are different from the challenges that would be experienced in Canada.
I will say our
Please.
speed in Canada is 3 times that of the U.S. Yes. to be
Yes,
quite frank.
yes, and that's another important element of it as well. Is there are several different ways to look at this issue and several different ways to measure this issue, and that's something that we're also working hard, especially recently, trying to develop more of an index. Because, for example, as I'm sure you know, looking strictly at download speed, for example, isn't necessarily too informative if latency or ping is very high, and
Yeah.
it's trying to get at more of an index for overall quality of service that we're now working on. I think we're very happy that the minimum standards are very well promoted and talked about in the public realm. The 50-10 is a good target, I think, and we try to keep in mind too, and as noted in the Connecting Canadian strategy, Canada's connectivity strategy. I was looking through it. As noted in that, though, I think keeping in mind that the very nature of the technologies that we're dealing with, technologies that are present in these facilities, technologies that are relevant for precision ag, the very nature of those technologies is that's a benchmark that's going to continue to move down the road.
Can I ask